Hello, my fellow squid kids. Why did I write that? Are you someone who recently got into Splatoon, but you want to learn more about its previous story modes before hopping into the recently released Splatoon Raiders? Or just someone who loves to watch anything they can about the series? Don't worry, I'm in the same camp. Well, I've got a video for you. Recently, I've been looking back and playing through the whole history of Splatoon's single-player endeavors, as it seemed like there's no better time than the release of what's looking to be Splatoon's biggest single-player campaign yet to do so. And so today, I will be going over all that has happened up until this recent release. So today, I will be going over this journey to cover every single Splatoon single-player campaign. And so hopefully together, we can find out what makes them special. Oh, and also be warned, as there will be spoilers for every single Splatoon single-player campaign. And don't worry if you're trying to miss a certain campaign section so you don't get spoiled. There are chapters you can click on in the video's description to skip ahead. But we got a long road ahead of us, so let's quickly talk about what exactly is Splatoon. Splatoon, now known as Splatoon 1, released on May 29th, 2015 on the Wii U, which we all know is certainly a video game console. But even on a failing ship, Splatoon found great success, selling around 5 million copies, which isn't a ton on its own, but that means around 1/3 of all Wii U owners bought the game, which is crazy for a brand new series. For reference, ARMS, a brand new series on the Switch, sold only around 3 million while being on a console base of over 150 million users. So, not the greatest. But enough about sales. What about the game itself? Splatoon is a third-person shooter, where instead of bullets that kill people, you shoot ink that kills people. But in addition to this, you play as squid-human hybrids, who have the ability to swim in the ink they produce. While this game does have more standard guns, there are a bunch of different weapons all throughout the series. The rollers, chargers, buckets, and so much more. They all feel so different to play and help the game feel unique. There are also a bunch of different game modes in the game, but that's not really what we're here for today. I've been a big fan of Splatoon ever since it came out on the Wii U. As one of the unlucky few to be blessed to have this console at the game's release time, I played Splatoon 1 a lot, even if I was bad at it because I was younger. Then I got Splatoon 2 and 3 on release and played them both to death, and we'll probably do the same with Raiders. Now, I'll explain more as we go along, but it seems like it's time we finally get into the actual story mode of Splatoon 1. So come join me as we make our way through every single Splatoon single-player campaign. After a short tutorial getting used to the controls, Splatoon 1's Hero Mode starts out with the news, where we learn from idols Callie and Marie that the grape Zapfish has been captured. Oh no! After a brief tour of Inkopolis, we follow a strange man down a drain, named Captain Cuttlefish. Once we emerge from the drain, we find ourselves in OCTO Valley. He tells us that the evil Octarians took the great Zapfish, and we gotta get him back. And, in doing so, names us Agent 3 of the new Squidbeak Splatoon. Now, go. So yeah, it's not like we have the most in-depth story to go off of, but hey, we can find our lore somewhere else. One of the collectibles you can get throughout the game are sunken scrolls, and whenever you get one, you get lore. Ooh. So, full transparency, I'm not going to be doing everything in these story modes. I will consider a game done once I have played every single level in the game. If there are any collectibles behind a wall to get there, I will collect them. But besides that, I'm not grabbing every sunken scroll and such. Sorry, not sorry. But anywho, let's go to the actual gameplay. Splatoon's Hero Mode uses a level-based structure. Basically, when you enter one of the game's 5 worlds, you are tasked with a certain number of Zapfish that you need to collect. You collect these Zapfish by completing a single-player level in which you get 1. After you get all the Zapfish in a given world, the world's boss will open up in which you can defeat them and move on to the next world. Yeah, it's a pretty basic loop, but this is a brand new series that's mainly a multiplayer game adding in a single-player campaign. It doesn't need to be crazy. But let's get back to the game at hand. After Captain Cuttlefish sets you off to go stop those evil Octarians, you go through the first 3 levels of the game, and get accustomed to the controls and how the game works. Splatoon is a very fun game to control. Its movement has always been the best part of the series. Honestly, my only gripe with the controls in this game is that I've become so used to the controls in Splatoon 2 and 3 that when I remembered that the X button was jump instead of the B button, it kind of annoyed me. But so far, it's not like these levels are crazy or anything, but I'm sure it's gonna ramp up and get way better as we go along. First thing that I gotta point out is the music. I feel like a lot of people know that one of Splatoon's biggest aspects is how alive it makes its world feel, and the music is no exception. Practically every single piece of music you hear in the game is attributed to some band or artist in the universe. Obviously the big ones are the big idol groups like the Squid Sisters, Off the Hook, and Deep Cut, but even in the single-player campaign where you're exploring an area completely away from Inkling civilization, the music that plays is still contextualized, being all played by the group Turquoise October. Here, listen to some of my favorites. But anyways, let's get back to the story. So as you collect your 3 Zapfish needed to enter the first boss fight, you face off against the Octo Stomp. It's a fine fight, but I'll be going more in depth on the bosses at the end of this whole section, so I won't say much besides it's fine. But not like bad fine, it's really just fine. As we do that, we head to the next area where, you guessed it, we find a certain amount of Zapfish, then fight the boss. But hey, the story does progress. We get words of encouragement from the captain. Yay! In World 2, we are introduced to the Octolings, who occupy one of 2 level types that appear in every world here on. Basically, it's your typical level where you go from point A to B, but now it takes place on a map you would find in the main game, but overrun by Octolings, and you have to fight your way to the other side of the map. It's a fun concept, but these levels especially can feel quite short, as the multiplayer levels weren't really built with length in mind. But it's nice to see these maps be used in the story mode, even if they could have been used better. Now, I did say that there were 2 level types that appear in every world, and the other are flying object levels. The whole gimmick of these levels is that at the end of the level there is an Octo Striker, an enemy that fires ink strikes all throughout the level. In this world, the flying object level takes place in the tutorial section from the beginning of the game, which is pretty cool. But after the second world, it just uses multiplayer maps like the Octoling levels, which make these levels go from kinda cool to kinda boring. Having 2 different levels in each world just boiled down to running through a multiplayer map that doesn't have the interesting platformer layouts that the rest of the game does makes them a little boring. I'm more keen on the Octoling maps though, as you're basically fighting other players, almost because the Octolings can do everything that you can, but with the flying object levels, you're just fighting off some random enemies and then like every 10 or so seconds you get interrupted with an ink strike. But anyways, we make our way through the second world, yada yada yada, we get to the second boss, beat them, and make our way to World 3. But hey, we do get some actual news story info. We get some gargled text from a mysterious source. Ooh. So, in World 3, you guessed it, we collect the Zapfish in each of the levels and then beat the boss. But let's use this moment to highlight another aspect of the game. You may have noticed this throughout the footage, but there are these little orange collectibles scattered throughout all the stages. These are power eggs, and the amount that you collect transfers from stage to stage, and you can spend your power eggs to upgrade your character. The things you can upgrade are your fire rate, your ink tank, and your bombs. And also, you can unlock 2 other bombs to switch freely between, being the burst bombs and the seekers. I think the upgrade system is kind of a nothing addition, because I don't think it really changes too much, especially with the time you have just playing through the story normally. But also, I wouldn't want the game to become way too easy just because I bought an upgrade that I'm pretty sure you can't turn off. But hey, at the very least, getting access to more bomb types is fun. But as before, we get the Zapfish from the levels, and then fight another boss, and once we beat that boss fight, we hear from Captain Cuttlefish that there are actually 2 other agents. But right after that, the mysterious voice from before seems to kidnap Cuttlefish. Oh no. Anyways, we make our way to World 4 alone, and then we complete a level on our own. But right after that, we get into contact with Agent 1 and 2, and tell us that they're gonna help us get back to Captain. But I swear I've seen them before. Nah, probably just going crazy. But anyways, you get the gist, and so while we go through World 4, I want to quickly highlight another cool aspect of the game, that being the environments. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this isn't something I'm usually that focused on, but I just love how they portray Octo Valley at all times. Everything here just feels off. Like how even in these levels where you're under bright blue skies, if you notice in the back, The bright blue skies that you're looking at are just nothing but giant screens with wires laid out all around them. I just love how much intrigue this adds to the life of the Octarians, having these simulated versions of life on the surface as they've been relegated down below. The only oddity really when it comes to the design of the world is the inclusion of multiplayer stages in the single player, as they've had no changes to them besides the time of day. But I suspect anyways their inclusion was already more of a resource saving one than a cool idea, but it really doesn't bug me whatsoever. We finish up World 4, and no hate to Cuttlefish, but I find the dialogue with Callie and Agents 1 and 2 to be way more fun than when it's just Cuttlefish. Having multiple characters who can work off each other just makes it a lot more fun to read. But we beat the boss and then move on to the final world, but not after another message from the mysterious bad guy. Ooh, lore. And now that we're making our way through World 5, the last thing I want to highlight with this game is its hub worlds. It's not crazy or anything, but I like that you have to uncover the levels before you enter them. But also navigating through the hub world can sometimes be a little tedious. But for the most part, it's nothing bad, and it's a fun little place to spend some time in between levels. But with everything out of the way, and every Zapfish collected, we can finally fight the final boss. We finally get to where Cuttlefish and the great Zapfish have been held captive, and we finally face down with DJ Octavio. And now I think there's no better time than now for a boss ranking! Now, for each of these campaigns, I will be ranking all the boss fights included in these from worst to best. So, let's start this ranking. In last place, we have the Octonozzle, who is the boss of World 2. The Octonozzle isn't a bad boss fight, it's just pretty underwhelming. Basically, the Octonozzle spits out projectiles which follow a path on the floor, and your goal is to hit the weak spots on its body while dodging said attacks. And once you hit all the weak spots, its tentacle will open on the top and you can do some damage to the boss itself. Repeat that a couple times and bam, done. I feel though that this boss is just way too simple. It has some more complex attacks, but you rarely get to ever see them because it's so easy to quickly just hit all of its weak points. At number 4, we have the Octo Stomp, the boss of World 1. To me, the Octo Stomp and Nozzle are pretty similar in rankings, but I'd give the Stomp more credit as it is the first boss, so I'd expect it to be pretty simple. The whole loop is that the Octo Stomp will run up to you and try to flatten you down, and once you dodge that attack, you can ink up its side and attack the boss. Rinse and repeat with each phase, making it harder to climb up. It's a fine boss and works well for introducing them as a whole. Coming in at number 3, we have the Octomaw, which is World 4's boss, and I really like the Octomaw conceptually. The way the boss works is that it will dive under the ground and then start to re-emerge from the ground below you, with its teeth surrounding you, and you have to break its teeth to move out of the way. And once you do it, it will have its mouth sitting there, and if you can remove enough teeth, you can throw a bomb into its mouth and damage it. Now, where the problem comes in is that this is really easy to beat. There's actually more attacks that the Octomaw could do, but I didn't even know this on my playthrough because you can beat the boss so easily. But even so, I really like the concept, and think with some tweaks it could easily become a really fun fight. At number 2, we have the Octowhirl, the boss of World 3. I'm a big fan of this boss. The main loop is that the Octowhirl will spin around the edges of the map like a Beyblade while spewing out ink, and then eventually it will roll towards you. But if you lay out enough ink in a line, it will sink down and you'll be able to attack it. The other phases increase the difficulty by first making the platforms rotate, and then making parts of the floor uninkable. Now, this boss isn't some hidden gem of game design, but it feels like it's using an actual unique property of Splatoon's gameplay for something special. But the number 1 boss is the boss that we actually left to go do this ranking, that being DJ Octavio, the final boss. Now, Octavio isn't a crazy complicated fight, but for honestly the first time in this game, it actually feels challenging. The fight is divided into 5 phases, with the main gimmick being that Octavio will shoot projectiles at you, but when he throws his big fist at you, you can ink them up and fire them right back at him, and doing so will knock him back, and you go through these small platforming sections and keep knocking him back until he's back to the final section of a phase, and you will have to play almost like a game of tennis with a rocket with him, and once it hits him, you will move on to the next phase. The other phases have more and more projectiles, and it's honestly really engaging, and I love the environments of this fight as well, with all the lasers flying around, almost like you're in a rave. Hell, DJ Octavio even plays his own final boss theme while you're fighting him. But the only real issue to me with this fight is its length. The boss can last 10 minutes, yes, but if you are messing up and dying every once in a while, that number can start to quickly go up, as the checkpoints are only between phases. I think this fight could have either done with removing a phase or just speeding up the pace, but either way it's a solid time. But as we reach the final phase of the boss, we find out to the surprise of everyone, I guess, Agents 1 and 2 are actually Callie and Marie, the Squid Sisters, who are also cousins, but to help out in the fight, they distract DJ Octavio, and we get to listen to the Calamari incantation as we go through the final phase and wrap up the boss. I love having this song going along with the final fight. It just makes things feel so energetic. I mean, there's a reason this is the most remixed song in the series, alongside just being a great song. Here, take a listen. We beat Octavio and send him flying, and then the story just kind of ends. We do cut back to Inkopolis, where Callie and Marie are on the news reporting that the grape Zapfish has returned to Inkopolis, and all is well or something like that. But that's it for Splatoon 1's Hero Mode. The campaign features lots of fun platforming that really help make the mode feel much more worthwhile, and if for some reason you have Splatoon 1 and never played the Hero Mode, I'd give it a shot. But I wouldn't go buy a Wii U for this. I'm not gonna say much more because I've been yapping for a bit, but I like the campaign. It's not crazy or anything, but it's fun to run through once or twice. But I'm just glad that we're done and we can move on to what's next. Oh, and yeah, we're doing a tier list thing, so yeah, I'd say I'd give this a B tier. Wait, what do you mean we aren't done with Splatoon 1?
Rated everyone 10 and up.
So, Splatoon actually has more content. In addition to the story mode's 27 levels, you can play a remix version of those levels via the Inkling Girl, Boy, and Squid amiibos that were released alongside of the game. Well, okay. I guess I can play a little more Splatoon 1. How many levels do I have to go through? There's 60? I'm gonna be very brief here, as there isn't really a whole lot to talk about, but each of the amiibos have a gimmick that sets the gameplay apart from the normal stages. And with this gimmick, you replay 20 stages from the story mode, including all 5 bosses in there. And yes, this does mean you have to replay the 15-minute DJ Octavio fight 3 more times. Yay! Anyways, the Inkling Girl's main difference is that instead of using your hero shot as your primary weapon, you use the hero charger. Yay! I've always been very conflicted on the chargers in Splatoon, because on one hand, my aim isn't that great, but on the other hand, it feels so satisfying to hit your shots. Like, the sound design is on point. But there's really nothing to write back home about. You do almost everything again, but with a sniper rifle. Yippee! Anyways, the Inkling Boys' main difference is that instead of using your hero shot as your primary weapon, you use the hero roller. Yay! I've always been very conflicted on the rollers Splatoon, because on one hand, my roller isn't that great, but on the other hand, it feels so satisfying to hit your roller. Like, the sound design is on point. But there's really nothing to write back home about. You do almost everything again, but with a roller. Wait, what am I talking about? I actually really like. But at the very least, after all of that, we do have the Inkling Squid, who thankfully actually has something vaguely interesting. So unlike their other amiibo friends, the squid actually gets 2 different gimmicks that are used in different stages. That being the first one, where your squid form is changed out with a kraken, and the second one, where you have limited ink throughout the level. I'm a big fan of the kraken levels. Maybe it's just the fact that this was the 4th time I had been playing some of these levels, but just being able to blast through them felt cathartic. And the limited ink levels are a fun challenge that really helps shape up the formula, as it turns it into almost a puzzle game. Though I feel like the amount of ink that you get feels a little too generous at times. I mean, these are supposed to be challenge levels where they test you, but whatever. The bosses are exactly the same besides the gimmicks, and that doesn't change it enough to where we're gonna rank them again. Sorry, I think. Despite how I've been talking about them, I do like the amiibo stages, but do not play them all back to back because they get rather boring. especially after just having beaten the Hero Mode campaign. I would be pleasantly surprised if they decide to bring back this type of content in future Splatoon. It isn't really groundbreaking content, but just getting some fun stages to play alongside your amiibo is a good thing. I just really didn't want to run through the levels I had just finished again. 3 times. Oh, C tier. It's now 2017, and instead of Splatoon living on a dying console, it's now going to be on the best-selling Nintendo console ever. So, a lot more eyes were going to be on the series now. So, not even half a year into the Switch, Nintendo released a follow-up to Splatoon, which was simply just named Splatoon 2. Splatoon 2 starts us off with another tutorial stage, but also it's nice to note that the character customization in this game has taken a big leap from the last one, with there being hair options for either the Inkling boy or girl now rather than just one hairstyle, and pants. But for the actual single-player mode, we have some story to get to. So, we turn on the news where our idols for the game, Pearl and Marina, tell us that the great Zapfish has been captured. Again. Oh, something new, Callie from the Squid Sisters is also missing. Cool. I mean, not cool like that's wrong, but hey, more story stuff is interesting, right? And as we get our tour of Inkopolis Square, we see a mysterious woman standing over a drainpipe. And so naturally, as all protagonists do, we follow her down the drainpipe. And once we are down the drainpipe, we re-emerge in OCTO Canyon, not to be confused with Octo Valley, where we find out that the mysterious woman was actually Agent 2 of the Squid Beak Splatoon, or better known as Marie, one half of the Squid Sisters, who are actually cousins. Yeah, no, I'm still confused on that one. But anyways, as Marie speaks to our uncultured protagonist, she gets them roped in as Agent 4 of the new Squid Beak Splatoon. So now it's time to go back to get the Great Zapfish. Again. So yeah, the story may just be a slightly edited version of the first so far, but that's fine. I mean, as long as the gameplay remains interesting and the dialogue itself is still fun to read, then we'll all be good. So, armed with our hero shot, we make our way out and enter the first level. So, the basic structure of this adventure is that you will adventure through platformer-style levels, where at the end, you will collect a Zapfish, and once you grab all the Zapfish in an area, you can fight a boss and then move on to the next. Wait. I should probably address the big Splatoon 1 hero mode-sized elephant in the room. Yes, the story is very similar to the first adventure, and yes, the gameplay is very similar, if not the exact same as the first adventure. While yes, I would have loved something more new, you do have to realize that this was made in 2 years after having the series launched on the Wii U. There's no doubt that it was a successful game for the Wii U, but at the time of making this, Nintendo wasn't even sure if the Switch would do well at all. So I can understand that the single-player campaign not getting some big shakeup. But still, let's go through the adventure and see if there's anything worthwhile to mention. Starting off, we do have a brand new collectible to add to the mix, that being Sardinium, which is used when upgrading your gear. I assume this was done so you wouldn't grind and get all the upgrades early on, but I don't know who would be doing that anyways. Honestly, I don't really like the addition that much, because it feels like with this, the price of upgrades are still pretty high, so I just ended up with a lot of Sardinium and not much to use it on. But that's pretty minor, all things considered. Along with this, I do think there has been a pretty general upgrade to the overall game feel and some other nice things. Like, praise the Lord, the B button jumps. I think it may just be a me thing, but I find the B button feels so much more comfortable to press than the X for jump. And with this as well, you can now also see how much ink a bomb takes to throw. This is another thing that I kind of took for granted in modern Splatoon. Like, I always am using it, but I never really notice it, you know? But I'll stop the compliments for now, as we're going to go fight our first boss, and then move on to World 2. But, this is not before we get introduced to the most important character in the Splatoon series. Everybody knows them! It's Sheldon! Jokes aside, as we move into World 2, Sheldon actually gives us access to the biggest shakeup we've seen in the gameplay so far. So now, almost every single level in the game, when you complete it for the first time, will say Sheldon Selects on it. Basically meaning that you will be given one of the 9 different hero weapons to use at each of the levels. Those being the Hero Shot, Roller, Charger, Dualies, Slosher, Splatling, Blaster, Brella, and Brush. I won't go in depth with these weapons as it's not really integral to what I'm talking about today, but if you must know, here's a tier list. Pause if you want to look. The hero weapons go a long way in making the gameplay feel more interesting, as now a weapon itself can be a gimmick for a level, and seeing how it interacts with the stage. Though one shortcoming of this model is that even though you are forced to use a certain weapon on your first go around, anytime after that you will be able to choose any weapon you please, which on paper is a good idea. But that means everything has to be balanced around the fact that any level needs to be cleared by any weapon. I don't think this really ever becomes too much of an issue, but in some instances I wish they went further with certain ideas. But we make our way through World 2 with our brand new arsenal, and along the way we see that the Octoling levels have returned. And while they still take place on multiplayer stages, they have been reframed to work a lot better. Instead of a point A to B mission like they were in the first campaign, you have to gather 8 different mini Zapfish from all around the map to complete the level. Now, this isn't a huge change, but this is more what I'm looking for, innovating off what the first game did. Oh, and the flying object levels are gone, thank God. But now it's time for another new boss fight, and oh my, look! Between World 2 and 3, our radio signal is visited by a gargled voice. Ooh. As much flack as I may give this game's story, the character writing has always been great. Sheldon, while definitely not talking as much as Marie does, still helps give the dialogue a bit of flair. These story modes always work so much better when you have multiple characters chatting in your comms, as it just makes the characters in World feel more alive. As we jump into World 3, I want to talk about how much more I like the level design of this entry. I feel like there was a much bigger emphasis on speed and flow in the design, and the easiest place to pick this out is in the addition of the ride rails and dash pads. Both of these are some of my favorite things to see in any of the story mode levels, as they just feel fun and cool to use. Splatoon has always prided itself on its world and aesthetics being cool and hip and such, so I think the levels leaning into this cool factor is a great decision. And also, I like feeling cool, so I'm not complaining. But after getting all the Zapfishies in World 3 and fighting another boss fight, we move on to World 4, where, you guess it, in between this we get another voice transmission with a mysterious character who kinda sounds like Callie. Ooh. But we make our way through World 4. This game is such a fun time, but I can hope you see why it's sort of difficult to talk about right after Splatoon 1, because it is so similar. Like, yes, I could definitely talk about the environments, which again are great, and the music, which again is also great. Here, let's look at some of my favorites from story mode, just so you know I'm not lying. Okay, I think this one note I wrote down while playing can completely describe this. World 3 continues to be good, but it's all just completely fine. Like, I feel nothing but content while playing. It's a good adventure, has some great moments as well, it's just all so samey. Oh yeah, we finish up World 4, get another ominous message, and move on to the final world, which I would like to take a moment and say the hub worlds are better in this game. They all take place in their own areas, so the environments are way more interesting. And they also have more to do in them, with collectibles and such. The 5th world would be the best one yet, as it's got some actually decent platforming bits inside the hub world, but its reliance on moving platforms can be a little frustrating. But hey, the final boss was one of the best parts of the original story, so let's see how they follow that up. But before we get to the finale, let's do another boss ranking! Coming in last at Splatoon 2's boss ranking, we have the Neo OCTO Stomp, the boss of World 3. As Splatoon 1's only returning boss, it is quite nice to see that this fight was updated. The weapon that you use for this fight is the Hero Dualies, and I think they complement the fight's design pretty well. It makes it so that you have to get up close and personal with the boss. I will say, even though this places low on this list, this boss would place pretty high if being stacked up against the bosses from Splatoon 1. The main difference between this fight and the Splatoon 1 version is that after the first phase, the Octo Stomp will start wearing a jacket, and you have to break that jacket in order to climb it, and you can break it by breaking the buckle on its face. So it really helps make the fight stand out from the original. In 4th place, we have the boss of World 2, the Octo Samurai. My opinion of this boss is very similar to the Octo Stomp. The weapon that you use for this fight is the roller, and again, I think it's a great complement to this fight, as you have to duck and weave around the boss in order to get a hit in, and also, unlike most of the bosses, you actually deal damage to the boss itself over time, instead of just waiting for a weak point to open up. Well, the weak point does open up after, but it's only after damaging the main body enough, you know? Next, with 3rd place, we have the boss of World 1, that being the Octo Oven. I really like this boss as an introduction to bosses as a whole in this game. Unlike Splatoon 1's Octo Stomp, I feel that it still features a decent amount of challenge in its design. The fight revolves around dodging the oven's attacks until all the bread loaf things pop out of the oven, allowing you to climb up to the top and damage the weak point. It's not groundbreaking, but it's a fun time that also evolves pretty well as the fight goes on, making it one of the most fun bosses in the campaign. At 2nd place, we actually have the final boss of this campaign, that being DJ Octavio. Spoilers. But I'll just touch on that in a second, after we go over number 1. In 1st place, and my personal favorite fight of the campaign, we have the Octo Shower, the boss of World 4. This fight is done using the Charger weapon, and it is just such a fun fight. The main gameplay loop is that there are Octocopter enemies that fly the boss around, and once you splat them all, the Octo Shower falls to the ground and reveals its weak spot. While you're attacking, the Octo Shower can do multiple attacks, like charging straight forward at you with a shower move. This boss isn't anything crazy, but it's just so satisfying to fight. And while I'm not that big on the Charger in the main mode of Splatoon, because I can't aim, when you are set up for success in this game, it just feels so good. But all in all, the Octo Shower is just such a fun fight. Anywho, back to our ending. As we square up with the final boss, we find out that, oh my gosh, Callie has been brainwashed and teamed up with DJ Octavio. Okay, so slight explanation time. Splatoon 1's final Splatfest, which is a big event in the series where we vote on a topic and then settle it by battling out in turf wars for a weekend, was pitting Callie against Marie, and in this Splatfest, Marie won. And the really cool part is that they made this affect the in-game world, having Callie be vulnerable to getting hypnotized by Octavio. But my only problem with this setup is that nothing really comes of it until the final boss. Having this reveal earlier in the story could have made things way more interesting. But I digress, I will eat my meal I've been given. The fight starts, and unlike the original Octavio fight, this one actually takes place in a single arena. But even still, a couple of his moves from Splatoon 1 are back, mainly his rocket punches. And if you've played the first game, this fight will seem pretty similar. After beating the first couple phases, Marie will be able to cure Callie of her brainwashing, and just like in Splatoon 1, the final phase will begin with Calamari Incantation playing, but this time it's a spicy version. I know it's very similar to the first, but I still love this section. You are given the Rainmaker as your weapon, and in this final section, you get to use the ride rails to go to the top of the stadium, where you dodge attacks and damage Octavio, finally knocking him down and landing the final blow on him, Rainmaker style. I really like this fight. I know it's a bit, easy and kinda iterative, but it's still fun. But anyways, as the screen fades to green and then black, we go to the news, where Pearl and Marina, who haven't a single clue what's going on, announce the return of the Great Zapfish and Callie. And with that, the credits roll. Now, I hope I've made it abundantly clear that I think this campaign kinda bugs me, but don't let that make you think that the quality is bad. The levels and boss fights are honestly overall way better to play through than Splatoon 1. There is so much fun to be had here, and even if I have gripes with the story, the character writing is always on point. Alongside the music and environments, everything here is great. I just think I'm tired of this formula. But as you can probably see with the timeline, we're just getting started. So hopefully, it's only up from here. I'd give Splatoon 2's Hero Mode a B tier, just a little above Splatoon 1. I hate to say it early, but I think we might have peaked. On June 13th, 2018, roughly 1 year into Splatoon 2, they released Splatoon's first ever paid DLC expansion, named OCTO Expansion. This was a big step in the series, as it showed that this was a big series, big enough to get a DLC like this, and finally introduced a new playable character to the Splatoon series. But let's start with the story. The story opens on a news segment, again, with Pearl and Marina, where Pearl hijacks the show to start her new segment, Inkopolis Fashion Focus, in which she talks about these squid kids sporting weird hairstyles. But nonetheless, your player character is told to go check out the weird metro station in the alley, and after doing so, you can start the DLC expansion from there. The Calamari incantation plays in the background, muddied up as text reads, "Pale summer moonlight shimmers on the seafloor. An octopus, unaware that dawn will bring capture, rests within a trap, dreaming fleeting dreams." You are rudely interrupted from your slumber as none other than Captain Cuttlefish yells at you. Though you aren't sure who Cuttlefish is, as you are actually an Octoling, who recently came into combat with Agent 3 of the new Squidbeak Splatoon, afterwards ending up here and losing your memory. But Cuttlefish states that since you were both stuck down here, and he heard you humming the Calamari incantation, you should both stick together for now. After a short tutorial to get yourself adjusted to moving and shooting, though it plays exactly the same as Splatoon 2, you come into contact with a talking telephone at the center of the subway station, more specifically for the Deep Sea Metro. He tells you that if you can gather all the fangs needed, yes, they are called fangs, he can take you to the promised land above, and also names you applicant number 10,008, in which Cuttlefish names you Agent 8 for brevity. You both agree to work together and board the metro train to find these fangs, where you were introduced to the train's captain, Sea Cucumber. This guy really isn't relevant to the main story, but he's a fun character and hosts all the challenges throughout the story mode. Anyways, right after that interaction, you play through your first mission. The level structure in OCTO expansion is quite different from the main game, as well as there are way more levels, 88 in total. But for now, in your first mission, you are armed with a splatter shot, and are tasked with making it to the end of the stage. Pretty simple Splatoon stuff. Along the way, you run into sanitized Octolings, which have this green and blue discoloration, and you find out that they are not on your side. After completing that mission, you are introduced to Pearl and Marina, those idols you always hear on the news. They have found Agent 3's radio while on a mountain near where the fight with your character and Agent 3 happened. After getting to know you, they decide to aid you in your mission, any way they can. After that, it's time to just go. I know the story recap was way longer this time, but that's one of the things that makes OCTO expansion great. There's actually a story to talk about. I truly don't mind the simplistic stories of the first couple campaigns all too much, but OCTO expansion is just so refreshing compared to them. And I know I mention this every time, but the character writing is just so good, especially Pearl and Marina. They're probably up there on my favorite characters on the series, if not topping the charts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's continue through the actual game and talk about the level structure, which has a sizable shakeup. So unlike previous Splatoon single-player campaigns, you can complete levels in a largely unique order. Immediately after beating the first level, you are able to either go left or right on the map, and your only goal is to collect the 4 things. It doesn't matter how many levels you actually beat. In fact, you can beat the whole story mode in only around 16 levels. This freedom is especially nice as one of the biggest points of this DLC is its increased difficulty. It's not Dark Souls. Actually, I don't know if it is. I've never played Dark Souls. But it's not like some ultra difficult challenge. Well, apart from one key moment that we will get to later. But it doesn't really matter how many levels there are. A big part of this retrospective includes going through every single level, so that's what I'm doing. Now, as we make our way over to collect our first thing, as typical, let's go over some aspects of this campaign I find interesting. First, I want to highlight this game's mission structure. Now, unlike previous Splatoon campaigns, you don't have a specific weapon or weapon set that you use throughout the campaign. Instead, upon starting a level, you will be given a choice on what loadout you want to use, except for the levels that don't give you that option. But whatever. This opens the door for so much freedom. While yes, the base Splatoon 2 hero mode had every single weapon class that was in the game as a hero weapon, there's just so much variety when it comes to the individual weapons. Like, just when it comes to chargers, you have the 2 extremes of the spectrum, the E-liter and the bamboozler. The E-liter takes longer to charge up but has even more range alongside more power, while the bamboozler has less range and power but charges insanely fast. Having all these options available makes it so that the possibilities are higher than ever. And since these levels are built around certain weapons, you can really hone in on what makes a weapon special. But anywho, after a bit, we collect our very first thing. And it's this weird black thing with some blades in it. Strange, but okay. But the story doesn't really progress. It's just back to the grind, which I don't mind though. If you are interested in the story, there's actually chat logs that Marina sends you from her and Pearl and Cuttlefish, all of which are supposedly happening while you're out doing these missions. And these are just so charming. Again, man, the character writing. But I know, I'm a broken record, I'll shut up. But it's time to grab the second thing. So, I think this would be a great time to finish talking about the actual gameplay. So while Octo Expansion does have your typical point A to B levels from the main story mode, there are also tons of unique missions in here as well. You might be using a special weapon like the Inkjet the entire time, or breaking targets, or fighting off waves of enemies, or participating in some of the ranked modes from Splatoon 2, well, more specifically Power Control and Rainmaker. There are even more mission types than these, but the variety is fantastic. It really helps break up the pace, as any level could be anything, even the bosses, who I won't touch on now, but they're just in here on some random mission you could stumble upon. Oh, I also forgot the 8-ball missions. They're fun. And no, that's definitely not the Stockholm Syndrome talking. The level designs themselves in this campaign are also just really strong. They do a much better job of fully showing off what a mechanic can do, since they don't really have to account for difficulty as much. There are so many levels just pushing niche mechanics to their fullest. I especially really like whenever you change up the way you play, whether that be giving a player a special for the entire time, or removing their gun and restricting them to bombs only, or nothing at all. But alongside all that, we have collected our second thing, and this one, looks like the bottom of something? Like a stand with a knob. I don't know, jury's still out on that one. The Marina adds that she suspects that these things are part of a larger thing, but story goes on. Now, with these really short story segments, you might be wondering why I'm praising this game's narrative, even with there not really being much going on. Well, I think the story succeeds with not much being there in the bulk of the gameplay, because they don't pretend like there is with the previous campaign. They don't wave their obvious mysteries and gargle text in your face like there's something really grand going on. And what's funny with Octo Expansion is that there is a ton happening beneath the surface, but we don't really get to see any of that until the end, just like the main story, but it just works with Octo Expansion. And also, there's a lot of stuff going on with the chat logs if you're bothered to get into that. I'm not a writing expert, but I know a good story when I see one. But as we continue on and go to collect our third thing, I want to really quick give another shout out to the environments and the music. I know, the sky is blue, or well, it's like a dark blue in this game, because we're like thousands of miles underground. Anywho, I think the whole aesthetic of this game is great. One aspect of the story that I haven't really talked about is how whenever you complete a level, you get a collectible, and these are called memcakes. And these are actually Agent 8's memories that you're collecting, and this is reflected in the world design, being very abstract and featuring a vaporwave-like aesthetic that really helps this feel like you've been transported into a different dimension. Along with this, the music is, like always, great. You know the drill, take a listen. But as we continue, we get the third thing in our collection. This time it's a very big cup. Neat. But alongside this, Cuttlefish thinks that we should put up a missing poster for Agent 3. So, after asking you some questions about their details, slap the sign onto the talking telephone. Now as we go to collect our fourth and final thing, I thought out of every section this would be an appropriate time to really show you just how much I enjoy this campaign. I know you hear me talk about all these cool details and design choices, but here is a actual list of my pure, unfiltered thoughts that I just wrote down while playing this campaign. It may have taken us a while, but we actually have a plot. Holy moly. Sea Cucumber is so awesome. I love the aesthetic so much. I love the complete theme for levels. Pearl and Marina, yay! Rail grinding is so cool. The 8-ball level where you get a lot of them is fun. I'm not that big on the missions where you just dodge stuff, but something variety is the spice of life, I guess. The limited ink returns to Splat 1. Neat. Not cool, but neat. Dude, the Righteous Rail Station kicked my ass. The test end screen happening right when you finish a challenge will never not be satisfying. I'm actually, like, engaged. This rocks. The chat logs are so charming. Like, Problem Arena are so awesome. Buster Station is awesome. I love picking shit up. This campaign is a lot longer than I remember. I don't want to do Girl Power Station. Wait, it low-key wasn't that hard. Another banger. Dude, this is so fire. I love this game. And other stuff as well. But I hope you get the point that this whole campaign is just so good. And that this is exactly why we need to get to the best part as quickly as possible. So, as you collect the fourth and final thing, which kinda looks like a lid, you take him all back to the talking telephone, where he tells us that he will take us to the promised land. Yay! After telling him that we are ready to go way too many times, he tells us that the door to the promised land will now open, and begins assembling the things into a machine. After getting in, Problem Arena tell us that we are in a blender. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But as our heroes are about to meet their smoothied fate, Agent 3 crashes in from the ceiling to save us both. Though this does come at the price of Agent 3 eating shit and being knocked out cold. But now that we have a true lead out of here, thanks to Agent 3 having a company access device, we start to finally escape out of here, while Cuttlefish stays behind to tend to Agent 3. And unlike the campaigns that came before it, we actually have a lengthy ending sequence ahead of us. This starts with there being 7 different escape phases, all acting as their own different levels. And you start these phases out with no weapon, just relying on mobility and stealth to make it out alive, all while Nasty Majesty from Off the Hook plays in the background. After so long, you are finally fighting for the life that your character has longed for. This whole escape sequence is just so awesome. The stakes have never felt higher in a Splatoon story, and oh my god, the music! As you make your way through the phases, you get your bombs back as well as an octo shot. And while you are also climbing your way up the facility, Agent 3 and Cuttlefish both seem to be kidnapped. But it all comes ahead in the 7th escape phase, where you finally find an elevator that heads straight to the surface. But before we can get to that, we still have to do a boss ranking! At the bottom, we have the Revenge of the Octo Samurai, found at the Wakfu Station. Octo Expansion features rematches of all the boss fights in Splatoon 2, well, besides DJ Octavio, but I'm gonna be completely honest and say that this might be the worst boss so far, like in the entire series. The Octo Samurai fight was a decent fight to begin with. I wasn't going crazy for it, but it was fun. So, they took that fight and just made it so that there are less walls around the arena and stuck you inside the Baller Special. So now you just run around the arena lightly tapping or exploding next to the boss, which isn't very fun. Next up at number 6, we have the Octo Stomp Redux, who is found at the Drop the Base Station. This boss is a souped up version of, you guessed it, the Octo Stomp fight. There's really not a ton to report on here. The fight is decently challenging, but that's more so because the boss is weirdly tanky, while also being a quite bit faster movement-wise. Alongside these changes, there are also new things, like more buckles to shoot at, bubbles that get in your way, but those all don't feel that important. You kinda just ignore the bubbles most of the time. But this is a big step up from the last fight, so I'll take what I can get. Coming in at number 5, we have the Octo Oven XXL, found at the Toastmaster Station. Do you like fighting lots of enemies on top of a bigger enemy? Well then, I got the perfect boss for you. I mean, yeah, there are some other small additions, but the big new addition is the fleet of enemies awaiting you at the top of the boss. But while this may seem like lazy design, I think it enhances the fight a lot. It really helps you think more about where you're moving, and your time is way more limited when it comes to getting up to hit the weak point. It isn't just a given anymore. Next at number 4, we have our last of the boss rematches, that being the Octo Shower Supreme, found at the Cool Your Jet Station. Now this, like the Octo Samurai, isn't that changed outside of using a special weapon now, but to be blunt, the difference is Inkjet is fun to use against the boss. It just feels so cool to fly around while trying to hit your shots on the Octocopters. Again, there really isn't a ton changed here from the original fight that we already talked about, but this is just a fun fight. Now for number 3, we must make a quick detour back to the story. As Agent 8 boards the elevator that will take them to the surface, the elevator suddenly stops, but then we get ambushed by our number 3 boss, Brainwashed Agent 3, found in this final phase of the escape sequence. I am a huge fan of this fight, especially on a conceptual level. After playing as an Octoling this entire story mode, you are now on the receiving end of all the Octolings you have fought against in previous campaigns, against your own custom character from the last game. Back in those campaigns, when you fight the Octolings, you probably found that they weren't that much trouble to take care of. Now, on the other side, Agent 3 feels like a beast to take care of. Also, making a boss that uses all these cool mechanics from the main game makes this fight a ton of fun. Agent 3 can do everything you can and more, as they have tons of different special weapons at their disposal. The fight lasts across 4 different phases, each of them using a different special weapon. Now 4 phases may seem like a lot, but Agent 3 has a similar amount of health to you, so if you know what you're doing and play well, Agent 3 can be wiped out pretty quick. And I like that. It rewards high level play, and doesn't make you just wait around long boss patterns. At almost every moment in the fight, just like you, Agent 3 is vulnerable. Also, I just have to note how cool it is that the boss theme is a remix of Splatoon, basically the main theme of Splatoon as a franchise. But I love this fight, not just for its mechanics, but its story significance as well. Also, I love the addition of when you beat the fight, you see the kill feed that normally only shows up during the multiplayer matches. But, as we continue the story, with Agent 3 and Cuttlefish now rescued, the elevator stops and there's a ladder leading up to the surface. And, as we make our way up, I still have to discuss number 2 on the ranking. As you may or may not be aware, OCTO Expansion is the first Splatoon campaign to have true post-credits content. As if you beat every single station in the Deep Sea Metro, you get a message that states you hear a door opening, and if you make your way back to the lockers in the main station, you will be able to challenge our number 2 boss, Inner Agent 3. Conceptually, this boss is also very interesting, as lore-wise, this fight seems to be taking place in Agent 8's head, as now that they have done every station, they have regained all of their memories and can remember the fateful day the Calamari incantation changed their life. The fight itself is pretty similar to the brainwashed Agent 3 fight, but everything has been cranked up to 11. This is by far the hardest challenge we have in any of the series up until this point. Inner Agent 3 is a suite of new specials, way more health, a whole new phase, and lots of auto bombs. I really like this fight, but at times it does teeter on the line of being annoying, mainly because of the auto bombs. But at the end of the day, this is a completely optional fight that you can unlock after completing the hardest campaign up until this point, so having a super boss like this is a fun addition. Also, I love the theming of this fight, having it take place at the end of the first campaign, with the Calamari incantation playing in the background, also with theming around the area to the Squid Sisters and DJ Octavio. But still, this is just a souped up version of an already great boss, so let's get on to the ending of the story. We follow Agent 8 as they climb up out of the facility and onto the surface for the very first time. I love this moment, as it never really felt like any of the protagonists really had any stake in the story before 8. And so when you have a character like 8, who the whole story is basically built around, when they succeed, it actually feels good. It doesn't just feel like I'm being dragged around while the story happens in front of me. But just in time to pick us up, Pearl and Marina show up with their own helicopter fleet. And so Agent 8, 3, and Cuttlefish board the helicopter. And after some more cute character moments, we fly into the sunset. Oh, wait, no, there is definitely something rising out of the water. So as you are about to finally escape, a giant statue resembling a human rises out of the ocean. Sorry, pause, quick lore explanation. The human race went extinct around 12,000 years ago before the events of Splatoon 1. Through big events like global warming, rising tides, big wars, such and such, and then marine life started to evolve and venture out onto land. And so that's where the Inklings, Octolings, and all these other creatures come from. Okay? Okay. So as this big statue rises from the ocean, we see that it is piloted by the telephone from the Deep Sea Metro station. And he is oozing out the sanitized ink that we've seen all throughout the story mode, and is now calling himself Commander Tartar. Tartar explains that he is an AI created 12,000 years ago by a great professor, with his goal being to pass humanity's knowledge onto the next worthy life forms. And so he has watched the evolution of all the life currently living above land, and how he's disgusted by them, with them waging silly wars, among other things. So his new goal is to destroy this current world and start anew, hoping for the next time there will be someone he deems more worthy. So he has slaughtered all the creatures who have made it through all the Deep Sea Metro's tests, creating the supreme DNA, the sanitized ooze with which he says the ultimate life form will emerge. And now, with 8 slipping out of his grasp, he is finally done with all of this current life on the planet, and will start with firing a giant beam aimed straight at Inkopolis, ready to kill them all. So as you can see, the stakes have definitely gone higher, but that's exactly what I've been wanting in these stories. We don't need big complex villains, though I do think this story does a great job at fleshing out the characters and world. As long as we have great moments like this ending, all's good. But to get back to the story, as the statue, named the Nils statue, starts to charge up its giant death beam, Marina conducts a plan. Agent 8 will cover the statue in ink to stop the beam from charging, as it gets its power from the sun. But this won't fully stop it, so we need Pearl to hit it with a giant attack using a killer whale. I just want to say I love this cutscene so much. The writing is just so fun and the characters are also fun. I especially love the detail of Marina's battle plans being done on your typical art application on a PC. It just breathes so much life into the characters. But we finally have a plan in motion, and we can finally go into my favorite boss in the game. Number 1 on the ranking goes to Commander Tartar, or more aptly, the Nils statue. Now, this isn't a fight in your typical sense, as you aren't really fighting a boss, as one of my favorite details shows. While describing how to take down the boss, the game actually treats this like a typical turf war match you can play in multiplayer, with the same opening, with a remixed theme, even using the same 3-minute timer. Like in Marina's breakdown, your goal is to completely cover the statue in ink. You can do this by exploding the hyper bombs that she will be launching all over the statue in waves. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you this is some secret hidden gem of boss design, but my god, everything surrounding this boss is top-notch. The stakes in the story have never felt higher. The environment of you being on the statue right while the horizon that you've been fighting to get to this entire time is just insane. Oh my god, Fly Octo Fly! The theme that plays in the fight, Fly Octo Fly, is my favorite theme they have ever made in Splatoon. Take a listen. As the fight goes on, you go all around the statue, as a challenge of both your platforming and aiming skills, as you only have 3 minutes to explode every hyperbomb, and you will be zipping around on ride rails, climbing up walls, and more. Now, this is definitely hype moments in aura of the boss, but come on, are you seeing this? But with the boss wrapped up and the statue covered in ink, you leave the statue and head back to the helicopter. Pros, ready yourself for the final attack, and after a super awesome beam clash, Tartar gets his shit wrecked, and we get the credits as we fly back to Inkopolis. I love this campaign so much, if that wasn't evident over the last however many minutes I just spent talking about it. The story is exactly what I want out of a Splatoon game. Still fun and full of fun characters, but not afraid to tackle greater plot points with some nuance to them. The gameplay is fun, but never too challenging to where it's infuriating. Well, maybe besides Iteration 3. And even if you aren't as skillful at games, they built in ways for you to get around the harder obstacles instead of just dumbing everything down. The music and everything else around the game is also just top notch. To the surprise of no one, I give OCTO Expansion an S tier on the list. I can only hope now that Splatoon has learned their lesson and will continue on a good track. Welcome to the year 2022. Lots of important things probably happened this year, but what's really important is that Splatoon 3 released on September 9th, 2022, and like clockwork, another campaign released with it. My hopes are definitely higher than before, as OCTO Expansion was received very well, as you can probably tell from the last section. But we've gotten this far, I don't need to sit here and explain stuff, so let's just get into the story. So, Splatoon 3 starts us off in the middle of the Splatlands, basically in a random canyon. And after customizing our character, who can actually be an Inkling or an Octoling now, we set off. Wait, that's not before customizing our little buddy. For the story mode, we actually get a little salmonid buddy to follow us along. And we can throw him at things, but we can get to that later. As we go through yet another tutorial, we end up at Splatsville, our hub for the game. And once again, the news comes on. But this time, the news for the area is hosted by a trio named Deep Cut, with Shiver, Fry, and Big Man. And they inform us that, again, the Great Zapfish has been captured. But after all of that, we get yet another tour of our surroundings, but our only concern is the strange man in the drain. So, once again, you know the drill. We follow the strange man down the drain pipe, and as we emerge in the crater near Splatsville, we are face to face with good old Captain Cuttlefish. And now he gives us some groundbreaking info. He tells us that the Arcturian army has kidnapped the great Zapfish. Okay. Anywho, he names us the new Agent 3, and we go into our first level. So, the main gameplay loop is that we go through platformer-styled levels to collect the Zapfish, and then we move on to the next area, and... It's just, I thought after Octo expansion we could move on to something new, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's keep going. As per usual, we move through the world, and then we run into this fuzzy ooze, and if we touch it, we die. But if we power up our little buddy using power eggs, we can chuck them at the ooze and clear it up. It's a fun mechanic, and I think it helps make the traversal through the world much more in-depth. But as we make our way through the world and complete a couple levels along the way, we get my favorite! Ooh! Gargled text! Okay. But let's just keep on moving. We play another level, and I would actually like to note something that they have finally put the special meter in the story mode. Your special is splashdown, and just like in the main game, by inking your surroundings you'll build up your special meter. It's honestly not something I ever thought of being added, but it's a great addition. Anyways, back to doom and gloom, as we finally make our way to the boss of the world. Oh, it's DJ Octavio. You're early. But as he comes crashing down the mountain, he blames Cuttlefish for stealing his army? Weird, but before we can get to the bottom of this, we start the fight. It's a pretty typical fight for Octavio, but you know, we'll get to that later. We defeat Octavio, and before we can learn anything else, the fuzzy ooze spills out and breaks the platform we were standing on. As we all fall down, we see Cuttlefish get taken by the ooze. And before the screen fades to black, we see Deep Cut standing over us. But, finally after this fake out of another boring story mode, the real campaign begins. So as we come to, we find ourselves in a strange world with snow all over the ground. We then venture forth and find the other members of the new Squidbeaks platoon, that being Agents 1 and 2, aka Callie and Marie, along with the former Agent 3, the Captain. They ask us for help in finding Cuttlefish, and so we're off. Afterwards, we can find our first level in Alterna, that being the area we're in. And after clearing it, we are free to do as we please. We do know that on the different sites in Alterna, of which there are 6, we have picked up 3 different signals for where Cuttlefish could be. But besides that lead, there's not much of a core structure. But while we go through, let me take a second to go over the core level structure. So for this latest adventure, it seems that we have almost a mix of Splatoon 2's Hero Mode campaign and the Octo expansion one, with the biggest similarity being that before a level, you will be given up to 3 different choices for your loadout. In the hub world, you will notice that there are both silver and gold kettles, with the difference between the two being that the gold kettle levels more closely resemble a level from the first couple campaigns, and will always give you the hero shot as one of your weapon options, while the silver kettles resemble the more challenge-like levels from Octo expansion, and require power eggs to attempt as well as never giving you the hero shot as an option. And speaking of the hero shot, the upgrade system has also been enhanced. Instead of spending your power eggs on upgrades, you have a skill tree, and you can earn points just by playing the game. Though you do have to unlock certain chunks using Sardinium, which you can acquire throughout the hub worlds and bosses. Along with this, the hero suit has also way more upgrades, like increased special charge, ninja squid, and more. One of the cool additions is that at the beginning of the campaign in the crater, you actually have access to almost every single upgrade, but then lose it after making your way to Alterna, almost like how some of the Metroid games do it. But cool decisions aside, we make our way through the first and second sites. As unlike the previous campaign, there's a boss fight every other world instead of in every world. As like Octo expansion, there's more levels, but they're usually more bite-sized. But actually, as we finish up the first world, we did have an encounter with Deep Cut, where they talk about how they've come down to Alterna in the hopes of finding treasure, and mistake us for also being after said treasure. But after they leave, we don't meet up again until the first boss of Alterna, that being Fry from Deep Cut. I won't really talk about the actual boss here, as I'm sure you know, but I love that we actually get to fight the idol members. As while other campaigns' bosses had fun fights, they didn't really leave a big impression, as they were just big Octarian weapons. Now, with Deep Cut filling most of the boss roles, we actually get some fun banter and story interactions between the characters. But we beat Fry and get access to the vault she was trying to get into. which was where one of the 3 signals we were looking for was. And inside, we find a big piece of metal. I'm not playing dumb like with the whole OCTO expansion blender thing, this really just looks like nothing. But anyways, after we do that, we head back to camp to drop off the piece, and then get into contact with Cuttlefish over radio, where he confirms that he's being held captive somewhere, but isn't sure of the location. But he assures us that he's hanging in there, and we begin going through sites 3 and 4. As we do that, I want to go over the typicals that I have been doing with each of these, beginning with the environment. Now, if you actually look at all the environments in this game, most of them are really pretty. I especially love the one where the cityscape is surrounding you with the buildings all around, but there is a big gripe I have with all this. The main background that you see in the majority of levels, the bright white one, isn't really that appealing. Like, it's not ugly, but it's kind of just boring to be honest. But that's not a deal breaker or anything, just slightly annoying at worst. Anyways, onto the music, which as always is great. Honestly, I think this might be the best overall hero mode soundtrack yet. Here, as always, take a listen. Usually the hero mode music is great, but not something I'm actively paying attention to. But with this soundtrack, there were multiple I was really liking. I don't really have more to say, as I'm not really a music expert, but I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. Next, let's chat about the level design. I've noticed that this game's levels feel a lot more inconsistent than previous entries, as there's a lot of levels I was just kinda on. But at worst, this game's levels are just okay, so that says quite a bit about the overall quality. As well, I feel like the levels are a lot less organic feeling. What I mean by this is that pretty much all the levels are just made using blocks laid around instead of custom-made pieces of geometry. Now, honestly, in my opinion, this isn't that bad of a change, as it allows them to make way more levels, but I can see why some wouldn't be that big on this change. I think this campaign takes a lot of good notes from OCTO expansion for its level design, especially in its more gimmicky levels. I want to give it an especially big shout out to the levels using the Zipcaster special. I never knew I needed to feel like Spider-Man in my Splatoon campaigns, but here we are, and it's awesome. But enough about all that, let's continue on. As we go through all of Site 3 and most of 4, and go to challenge our second boss, Shiver, and after promptly beating her up, we open another vault to see where our signal led us to. And yet again, it's another weird metal part. But we stash it away once again, and we have another call with Cuttlefish, where after talking, we find out that he is being held captive by someone. That someone being Mr. Grizz. So, if you're unfamiliar with Splatoon, Mr. Grizz is the CEO of Grizzco Industries, which hosts the side mode Salmon Run, in which he hires players to collect golden eggs from salmonids. So it's strange to see him here. In fact, we've never seen his full body before, as he only communicates through radio, but I'm down to see where this story goes. Anyways, as we continue on, we go to clear the last 2 sites, that being 5 and 6. But as we go to the final sites, let's go over some key details about this campaign. First, I want to comment on one thing. So with Splatoon 3, they actually added 2 new moves to your moveset, that being the Squid Surge and Roll. And I think these are pretty good additions to the moveset. But for some odd reason, there is only one level in the entire campaign that requires the use of these moves. That being After Alterna. You know, the level that you only unlock after beating the entire campaign. Speaking of After Alterna, it's a fun time. I'm much more keen on having a big gauntlet as the final challenge instead of a boss. Probably because I'm better at platforming, but I digress. I think it's a pretty fun addition, but still, I wish that these moves were used more. Along with that, I'm a big fan of the pacing of this adventure. I think it's still around the same length as the previous ones, but everything just feels so much faster, and it makes it so that even if you're not that big on a level, within a couple minutes you'll be on to something new, which I think is great as it helps it from becoming stale like the other campaigns had. I think the change of having 2 more worlds than before also really helps this feeling, because you're always moving on to the next world and you keep on going. But already, I think it's about time we wrap up this campaign. So as we fight our final member of Deep Cut, that being Big Man, after we destroy him, we figure out what's at the 3rd and final signal, that being an engine, and no Cuttlefish. But we bring it back to camp, and then get another call from Cuttlefish. where thanks to his knee, we can deduce that he is somewhere up high, and if you've been paying attention, the only place that it can really be is the giant rocket in the center of Alterna. But there is a problem, as it is surrounded by a gigantic mass of fuzzy ooze. But that's no problem for the new Squidbeak Splatoon, as we all take the pieces we've gotten so far and assemble them into a big machine, and then the captain uses it to cut down the ooze. And now we can finally scale the rocket and go save oh wait, Deep Cut is here. So Deep Cut comes at us and demands that we give back the treasure. And so as they ready to square up, we just say, okay. I mean, we aren't using it anymore. After this, they kind of feel bad about harassing us, as they see we meant it when we said we weren't treasure hunting before, so they decide to aid us in our mission. But with all that out of the way, we can begin climbing the rocket. The sequence is kind of obviously taken from OCTO expansion. They even start you off with no gun, but anywho, we climb our way up. To me, this whole campaign kind of screams Diet OCTO expansion. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think they might have taken some of the wrong lessons from OCTO expansion's success, as the biggest problem before OCTO expansion was how iterative the series was becoming. And now seeing them just taking what worked from OCTO expansion and slapping it in a different story mode makes me a little worried. But still, I think this is a better story mode than the other hero modes, but I hope they just continue to innovate still. But as we keep climbing up the rocket, we actually find the Great Zapfish, floating in some tube. If I'm being completely honest, I kind of forgot we needed to rescue the Great Zapfish by this point. But anywho, we don't really have time to save them as we still have to go grab Cuttlefish. So we climb higher and higher, and as we are about to reach the top, we hear Cuttlefish cry out while Mr. Grizz approaches him. But before we can get to that, we still have to do a boss ranking! In last place we have Fry, the boss is Site 2. Fry is our OCTO Stomp replacement for this game, and her boss is honestly not that bad. I think this might be my favorite out of our last place finishers so far, but they all involve her commanding her swarm of eels. But overall she's a fun fight, and all the deep cut fights have some good dialogue to go along with them. In fourth place we have DJ Octavio, who is the boss of the crater. This fight isn't that complicated as it's the first boss of the game, but I think it's a fun fight. Not that complicated, but it's a fun twist to have the boss usually reserved for the end of the story being at the very beginning. And most of Octavio's attacks are pretty similar to what you would see in those fights. In third place we have Big Man, the boss of Site 6. Now I really want to like this fight more as it's a giant reference to Super Mario Sunshine, with all the eels swimming around in the floor, but I find the fight way too easy, especially since this is the last boss before the finale. But still, I really like the mechanic of all the little big man splitting up when you damage them, and the reference is too cool to ignore. In second place we have the final boss, who I won't get to now, because beforehand, we should go over my pick for the number one boss, that being Shiver, the boss of Site 4. Shiver is just such a fun boss to fight. It's actually kinda crazy because they're a harder boss than Big Man, even though she comes up before him. Alongside this, I just think the overall fight is fun. Basically, Shiver will ride around on her pet shark, Master Mega, and Master Mega will attack you, but if he ever leaves his mouth open, you can throw in a bomb, which will leave him open to damage in the middle of the arena. Though the cool part is that even still, the boss is able to be attacked at any moment during the fight, and once you do enough damage, you can damage Shiver herself. It's not a complicated fight, but it's got good depth to it, and it's also just really fun. But anyways, with our ranking out of the way, let's continue on with the ending. As we reach the top of the rocket, we find Cuttlefish, and it seems that he has been dehydrated and bitten the dust. But before we have time to dwell, the big bad shows up, who is also our number 2 boss fight, that being Mr. Grizz. Grizz tells us his plan of how he's gonna spread his fuzzy ooze all across the planet, and bring back the age of the mammalians. And so, he jumps on his rocket to space. What? That's gonna crash into the Earth and kill us all. Oh, okay, cool. So, obviously, after that, we take a moment to mourn the loss of Cuttlefish, and then a tear from the captain brings him back to life, right? And so, immediately after that, we gotta figure out a plan. So, Deep Cut teams up together and gives us a spacesuit so that we can be rocketed off a spire of ink while riding a shark into space. Oh, okay then. I mean, I wanted new stuff, I just didn't think we were gonna go crazy in the last section of the story and go to space. But, you know, I'm down for whatever the game throws at me. So, we land on the rocket and begin the fight with Grizz. The first 3 phases involve platforming across the rocket while grabbing golden eggs, which we can use to clear fuzzy ooze in order to close in on Mr. Grizz. Once you get close to him, you can damage him enough to where an ooze bubble will come out one of his holes. After that, you can throw a small fry at the ooze bubble and then just repeat this 3 times. Once you beat those 3 phases, there's a cutscene where Grizz launches you off the rocket, and while all hope seems lost, you get suddenly rescued by DJ Octavio. And also your small fry absorbs the marine life power of everything on Earth, like a spirit bomb, and then turns into huge fry? Oh, okay. Well then there's something at least a little more normal for this franchise. Deep Cut and the Squid Sisters join together and sing a new rendition of Calamari Incantation as the final phase begins. During this phase, you stand on top of the Octobot King, and by going into the ink in the middle, you can pilot it. And you beat the phase by using the Octobot King to damage all the ooze bubbles on Mr. Grizz, within the 3-minute and 33-second timer. And after beating the final phase, we get some final words from Mr. Grizz, and I think he dies? But alas, we get to go home safely. Like usual, the news comes on and celebrates the return of the Great Zapfish, along with Deep Cut realizing they've been working with the Squid Sisters during the finale. But after that, they send us off and we hit the credits. What an ending! I think this campaign, while not hitting the highs of Octo expansion had before, it's still a better time than what came before with the 2 previous hero modes. I've talked about before how I'm not sure if they learned the right lessons from Octo expansion, but also with this still being a tutorial for the main game and such, I can see why we didn't get to do a big shakeup. But at this point, we only have 1 campaign left to go over before we get to the present day, so join me one more time and let's see what the future holds. Oh yeah, let's also give Splatoon 3 Return of the Mammalians A tier. As we wrap up this retrospective, we go to the year 2024, as that was the year the second wave of the Splatoon 3 expansion pass came out, featuring a new DLC campaign called Side Order. Now, for the last time, let's kick off the story. Like with every other story mode, we start with a news announcement, in Fry's new segment, Rumor Filet, in which he talks about how recently, in Inkopolis Square, the hub of Splatoon 2, there have been a lot of people who are more spaced out than normal, not really acting like themselves. So, after seeing this, you obviously decide to hitch a ride there yourself. And once on the train, the new Agent 3 falls asleep, and then we switch perspectives as the campaign begins. We come to a bizarre version of Inkopolis Square, where everything is all grey and empty, as a voice calls out to our player character, that being Agent 8 from Octo Expansion. The person talking to us is none other than Pearl, from Off the Hook, though for some reason she's a drone? I don't know, just roll with it. She info dumps, and then tells us that she's ended up here, and can't really seem to figure out why, or find Marina, and also how she really isn't sure where she is. So, with no other options, we leave the hub, named the Order Sector, and walk into the main building. As we get in there, we are attacked by the main enemies that we'll face during this journey, named Gelatins. So, somehow, Pearl conjures up a weapon for us, and we take them down. Afterwards, the elevator opens, and we meet Oct. Oct is a sanitized Octoling, friend of Marina, and a DJ, known as Deadfish, who you might have noticed was the in-game artist attributed to the majority of the soundtrack for Octo Expansion. Though strangely, even though she is sanitized, she seems to be completely fine mentally. But anyways, as we meet her, we learn about the Order Spire and how it works, and she agrees to join us in ascending the spire to try and find Marina. And so, the tutorial begins. Side Order structure is much different compared to every campaign we've had up until this point, as it is a roguelike, meaning that you will ascend the tower with a random assortment of floors each time, and once you die, you are sent down to the very bottom. Though for this tutorial tower, everything is predetermined to show you the ropes. The main loop of Side Order is that on each run, you will go up the tower one floor at a time, and you can choose what floor to go on based off the info given. You are given the type of stage, and the name of the map, as well as your reward for completing the stage, that being some membucks and a color chip. Membucks are your currency as you climb the tower. They can be used on multiple things, but their main applications are being used at the vending machines you find and being converted to a different currency, pearls, at the end of a run. But we'll get to that later. The other reward are color chips. These are basically your upgrades, and they come in 6 different colors, all representing a type of upgrade, that being power, support, range, mobility, luck, and drone. The upgrades are more specific from there, but these are the general categories. Your actual moveset is pretty identical to the main game, but you will notice that there's 2 new things, that being the chain and Pearl Drone. Firstly, the chain. You can fill up your chain by killing enemies in a row without letting the meter go down to the bottom, and the higher the chain, the more likely that it is items will drop from enemies. This can be a multitude of things like armor, ink refills, and my personal favorite, lucky bombs, which will explode after dropping from an enemy. You can buy upgrades for the chain, like adding new drops and making items more likely to drop, and so and so. As for the Pearl drone, Pearl will follow you around in all of the levels. You can grab onto her to glide around the level, but she becomes much more interesting with her upgrades, which allow her to do multiple things, like launch a killer whale, a bomb, become a sprinkler, and more. All of these are tied to her drone gauge, which fills over time or can be filled up by inking or splatting opponents if you get the right upgrades. But for the levels themselves, they're all pretty bite-sized, which makes sense, as you don't want runs to be too terribly long. An average run from bottom to top of the Order Spire takes around an hour, but I'm getting ahead of myself. As we go through the tutorial, we get introduced to all the main level types. These types include Destroy the Portal levels, where there are portals scattered all across the stage that spew out enemies, and you can destroy the portals by damaging them with your ink. Destroy them all, and you win. Fleeing Foe levels. There are these enemies called Panicking AMIIBOs, who run all across the stage super fast. Defeat them all, and you win. Sink the Infinity Ball. It's basically just the 8-ball levels from an OCTO expansion, but instead, thank God, they can't be knocked off the map. Protect the Zone levels, where you basically play a game of splat zones with the enemies, making sure your turf is inked long enough to win. And finally, we have Escort the Turbine Tower levels, where you have to get a tower from point A to B, and the only way you can move it along is by hitting it with your ink. Along with this, there are also boss floors, but as you suspect, we aren't really getting into that right now. But we make our way to the top of the tutorial tower, and at floor 10 we have our first boss fight, as we find that Marina has been imprisoned in some giant machine, and as we try to get her out, it begins to attack us, so we have no choice but to fight. But after doing all that, we can get her out and rescue her. But as she comes to, the machine occupying her becomes clouded in black smoke, and exits from it the villain of this campaign, Order. After saying some vaguely threatening things, he blasts us all out of the tower as the campaign can truly begin. I like this opening, and one thing that I would really like to point out is how great the character animation is. It was also great in Splatoon 3's hero mode, but I don't know, it just sticks out to me here more. Along with this, I think it's really cool that for the first time we have a protagonist show up as a playable character again. And if it had to be any of them, my vote would be on 8, so I don't mind. But to continue along, we come to with Marina and regular non-drone Pearl above us. Marina shares that we are currently in the Memverse, a prototype virtual reality she made, and she tells us that we are not actually physically here, only our minds are, which were dragged in by Order. She further explains that Order is dragging people in and using a process called grayscaling to neutralize their will, which will affect them in the outside world, hence why the residents of Inkopolis Square were all spaced out. So, with a goal, we now set out to beat Order. Oh, I guess Pearl can also just turn into a drone whenever she wants. Good for her. Though, we do finally find out what the pearls that I mentioned do. You can give them to Marina, and she can use them to hack the tower, giving you access to some permanent upgrades, like more lives, extra vending machines, and much more. I like this system, as it means they can make the Spire pretty challenging, as if you fail, you'll always be able to be better off on your next run thanks to the upgrades, meaning that your time wasn't spent doing nothing. But Marina also points out that the tower has gotten way taller, with there now being a total of 30 floors instead of 10. And the last new thing is that we learn about the pallet system. For each main weapon type, there is a character who has a pallet tied to it. Like, your first pallet is Pearls, who uses the dualies. Along with this, they start with specific sub and special weapons, though these can both be swapped out at a vending machine. As well, every pallet has 2 types of upgrade chip they favor, like how Pearl's pallet favors luck and support chips. All this means is that they have a higher chance of spawning throughout the floors. I do really like that they are all tied to different characters, as whenever you unlock one, Pearl and Marina talk a little bit about each of the characters. And so we get some confirmation, like that Agent 4 is still kicking, which is nice as they're the only character relevant to the story mode, who we haven't really seen of in a while. But anywho, I digress. After this whole section, we don't really get any real story moments until the very end, which makes sense as this is a roguelite. We do get lots of cool chats in the elevator that give us cool info, but they really aren't that important to what we're talking about today. So, as our ragtag group climbs the tower to face Order, let me talk about my thoughts on the campaign. So, like clockwork, for the final time, let's go over the environments and music. First off, the environments. I really like the hub world, with it looking very weird and bizarre, and the color choices make characters like Marina pop out very nicely. As for the actual levels, I'm not that crazy on them. I mean, they're not bad, and have some really cool details, like all the boxes being filled with people's memories in them. I just don't really think much of them. And also, that might be due to the fact that this campaign has some really stressful moments, so I didn't exactly have time to appreciate some of the finer things. As for the music, you get the drill. Let's listen to some tunes. I will be completely honest and say that this might be my least favorite of the soundtracks that we have looked at. While it has some bangers in there, they are pretty much all just the big important vocal themes and whatnot. It's not that I think the music is bad, it's just that none of it really stands out to me. It all just fits its role, and that's about it. The one really cool thing is that for the first time, every single boss in this campaign has their own theme, which really helps them feel more unique. I know I've said it every time, but the character writing is still great. But there's really not much we haven't seen, as we already got tons of Pearl and Marina through OCTO expansion, but as I said before, they're both delightful characters, so I don't really mind. I think this mode, while not being as replayable as most full-on roguelike games, has a lot to offer. I still even come back to this from time to time just to do a run or two, and it's just super fun to experiment, as unlike a lot of roguelikes I've played, I find that the majority of upgrades all feel pretty impactful while not being game-breaking. But the thing with a roguelike mode is that I can't really come up with a ton to talk about. Sure, it's super fun, but there's not really a lot to document on. So, let's just jump to the finale. So, we go up floor after floor fighting waves and waves of enemies and bosses along the way, and not to brag, but I made it to the final boss on my first try. So, we step out of the elevator to confront Order. But you know the drill. Before we do that, say it with me, we still have to do one last boss ranking. And last place we have Marina Agitando, the boss at the end of the tutorial. I'd like to start out by saying this is a pretty fun boss. It just really suffers from being too short. Basically, you go around the area and blow up all the portals spewing at enemies. And once you do so, you can damage Marina and end the fight. Yeah, it's only one phase. I get that since it's a tutorial boss, they didn't really want to do multiple phases, but it sucks because the song is so good. And fourth place we have Parallel Cannon, found on the Intensifying Harmony floor. To start off, there is one really cool thing about this boss. The main gelatin shown with the group actually uses the same hairstyle as your Splatoon 2 Hero Mode character, if you have a save file. This boss is basically just an onslaught of Octoling enemies, but instead of Octolings, you have these weird metal things. But as much as I think it's a really cool fight conceptually, it really is just fighting a bunch of AI-controlled players and nothing more. Okay, I lied. A couple enemies can spawn. My bad. In third place, we have Pinging Martial, found on the elusive Bounder floor. I do like this boss, but I just don't think it's that crazy. Basically, all you do is chase down the boss and damage it until it goes to the next phase. It will spawn enemies and attack at times, but that doesn't really change your strategy. It's all about rushing in and attacking. But hey, it's still fun, and getting to the boss can involve some strategy on your part. In second place, we actually have our final boss, Order. But as always, we can't really get to that now, so let's go over our number one pick. In first place, we have a Synchronous Rondo, found on the Layered Rotator floor. I really like this boss. The boss spins around and has these faces on it, and when they are attacked, you can slowly chip off each layer of the boss. You can just brute force and attack the body itself, but it will do significantly less damage. But at the bottom, the boss also has a light that is rotating around, and if it catches you, it will start to attack. You can use stealth like hiding in the ink to make sure it doesn't see you. But all of this happens while fighting off enemies, so you have to balance between these two, and it makes for a very fun fight. Anyways, back to our finale. So we go up there and challenge the final boss, Order, who transforms into Overlorder. This boss is basically just an upgraded version of the Marina fight, which already has some good parts but wasn't very long. So, pretty much everything is the same here, except Overlorder has a suite of new attacks to use. And overall, I think it's a pretty tough fight and takes a lot to beat, but thankfully, oh, wait, I'm dead. Damn it, let me just make my way up to the Wait, no. Okay, this time I'm gonna... okay, this is it. Wait, okay, yes. So we make our way up and beat the final boss. But it seems like it wasn't enough, and Order starts to spread their influence all across the world. Oh no! But after this, we have a short segment where we have to time our button presses to the tune of the song, and we use it to bring Agent 8 back into the fight. And after some words of inspiration and encouragement, we start the final phase of the fight. But it seems that Order has gotten rid of all of our chips in the palette, but we can get them back and more by clearing the portals. I really like this section, as it's a glimpse into what's possible with a fully maxed out weapon, even if you can't get this powerful normally. But the fight plays out still pretty similarly to the first couple phases, just now you are really powerful. After getting all the chips together, Pro can do one final attack and save the day. Order gets turned into Smallisk, this little squid thing, and our heroes finally make their way out of the Order sector. And that's a wrap on the story. This campaign isn't the most flashy with cool visuals, but I think it's probably my favorite campaign when it comes to just plain gameplay. As while its roguelike inspirations may limit it in some areas, it creates an experience you can't find in any of these other modes, having something that actually feels fun and fresh to replay. And for that achievement, I have to reward it. I had a blast with this campaign, more than I remember initially, and I'm gonna give it A tier, right above Return of the Mammalians. And we're done! Thank you to everyone who has made it this far, as this is my first time making something this long. I'm a big fan of Splatoon and its campaigns, as I hope you've been able to see through this. I actually haven't been able to play Raiders yet, as I've been so busy with this video, but I'm super excited to hop into the game, and everything I've seen beforehand makes me super excited to see where this series heads next. Splatoon has grown on me so much over the last decade, and has become one of my favorite franchises. I would love to talk about this series more, but this video has run on long enough. Here's one final look at our tier list, with OCTO expansion topping the charts, and one more thank you to everyone who has supported me. And hey, maybe I'll give more of my thoughts on Splatoon if there's interest, but as for now, thanks for joining. My name's Versanite, and I've actually had this really cool idea for a Splatoon weapon for so long. Okay, so basically it's called the chain shot, and you launch a big ball of ink, and it's tied to a chain, and then you can press the fire button again to rocket it back to you, allowing you to position yourself around enemies. And I think it's really cool. Nintendo's going to take my idea someday, and no one's going to believe me when they do, but you all have to believe me, right? You all have to believe me, right?